Oh, all right. Appears we lost Jim. Not really sure what happened there. Breaking news came out yesterday from Adam Schefter. John Harbaugh has been fired by the Baltimore Ravens as their head coach. The reporting on it seemed to suggest that it was an unwillingness to move off of his coordinator positions that ultimately led to the firing, and this was not a decision that was made very quickly.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, here's what I was able to cobble together today. As late as last night, Eric DaCosta and John Harbaugh had conversations about the coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Harbaugh was arguing with DaCosta, not in a bitter way, but a debate way, that Todd Monken had done what they had asked him to do,
Mm-hmm.
which was create game plans so that Lamar Jackson, would not have to run as much, and that Derrick Henry would do
Mm-hmm.
it. Nobody, and if you early part of the season, they were scoring points like crazy.
Yeah.
Then Lamar broke down, right? Things started to go on that thing. The offensive line had problems, blah blah blah, whatever you want to do. So my guess is DaCosta wanted somebody off that staff, and he didn't really care. I imagine he just said, just fire the defensive coordinator, fire the offensive coordinator, just fire somebody. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And John was basically like, no, I don't think we need to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as of last night, both DaCosta and Harbaugh had no idea he was going to get fired.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until late last night that um, last night or the night before, I can't remember where. Yeah, it didn't have to be. He was fired yesterday. So yeah.
Yeah.
So these days are running together on me here. So last night, um, DaCosta gets a phone call from Bisciotti saying he thinks he was going to pull the trigger on Harbaugh,
Mm-hmm.
and he runs the show. So Eric goes, well, you know, what's the plan? And
Mm-hmm.
he goes, well, we're going to go and get another coach. Um, there's an old saying, and that is the one, of winning franchises. It doesn't matter whether it's, the NFL, NBA, NHL, anybody. Have a plan before you fire the guy who's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. They don't have a plan. They fired him, uh, and Kevin Harlan, who Kevin's a longtime friend. Kevin's brother Brian is an agent
Mm-hmm.
and has a number of coaches on, specifically pro coaches. Some coaches who are uh, head coaches, and some coaches who are position coaches. And he started getting calls last week about what they thought that was going to happen with John. And as of yesterday afternoon, about 10 minutes after he left the building, we had reports of as many as a dozen teams, some who had not fired a coach,
Mm-hmm.
calling them about John Harbaugh. So I guess what we've got to do here is the anatomy of Steve Bisciotti. Um, this is the only coach Steve Bisciotti hired,
Mm-hmm.
and he almost didn't hire him. The guy who was there ahead of him was Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Payton was all but signed before Jerry Jones sent him a text and goes, whatever they offered you, come home. Because Jerry
Yeah.
got pissed off and, let him go. Well,
Mm-hmm.
he came back. So Harbaugh was the sign. Um, I'm not here to defend John Harbaugh or the front office's idea to get rid of him. Both of those that's up to the management. That's up to the owner. But you better have a plan when you fire a guy who is a Hall of Fame coach. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think that's a good rule of thumb, regardless of who you're firing.
Yeah.
It is you need to have a way that you're going, but especially when you've got somebody that's as entrenched as John Harbaugh was with Baltimore.
Hmm.
Another report that came out, I think it was Ian Rappaport talked about it on NFL Network yesterday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
The firing had been announced. It said that it wasn't like a 100% thing, but that there was a disconnect now between John and that locker room, uh,
Mm-hmm.
specifically with Lamar Jackson, the quarterback.
Yeah.
And it really, I think the players had just kind of started to doubt him um, as a head coach. And, regardless of whether or not somebody has a plan, when a locker room starts to turn on you, there's really no turning back, regardless of how good of a head coach you are. Um, it's not something that feels like it's ever truly a recoverable situation, which stinks because as you stated, there's like a dozen teams that have reached out with interest to Jordan Harbaugh. Some who do have head coaches still. I know the Dolphins are one of them that have reached out
The
in
Bucks star.
to John Harbaugh. That was another team that I was actually thinking about. I was thinking about what we were going to talk about today. I thought about mentioning the Bucks because there's definitely a number of teams that maybe they were kind of iffy on whether or not they were going to fire their head coach,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately up to this point have decided not to. Like they survived Black Monday, but with a firing such as John Harbaugh's, it now kind of almost reopens that window for firing your head coach
Mm-hmm.
because now you feel like there's a candidate that's out there that's better overall.
Mm-hmm.
Because before this coaching cycle didn't really have like a clear cut number one guy in terms of so and so fired him. He's definitely going to be it. I think prior to Harbaugh's firing is probably Stefanski, who Cleveland fired. But now you have that clear cut number one, and that guy that a lot of franchises view
Mm-hmm.
as well. He's a Super Bowl winner. That's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's now a guy that you feel like you can come in and you can win with because he's a proven winner at all his other stops. And so it now I think this is going to shift the way this job market's going to work in terms of the head coaching searches,
Mm-hmm.
because John Harbaugh is now probably going to have to be the first domino to fall before
Right.
everything else starts to fall into place.
I would agree. I think if I had to take and rank the openings, what opening would be the best? If indeed, I think that John to Atlanta with Todd Monken as his offensive coordinator, he wouldn't have trouble hiring a defensive coordinator.
I
Would be a home run.
Yeah, I would say if you're in Atlanta because he was not fired, to my knowledge, he's still under contract. Their defensive coordinator this year, Jeff Ulbrich, the defense in Atlanta was not the problem this year.
Okay.
He's a really good defensive coordinator. I think if you were able to bring in John Harbaugh and Todd Monken together and have Jeff Ulbrich still on staff, that's a big win in terms of the overall staff for Atlanta. And it feels like one that could be kind of a culture shifter in Atlanta. I've talked a lot about how, outside of a couple of nice years from Dan Quinn, one obviously being a Super Bowl, that's an outstanding result in terms of what their average has been.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta hasn't been a consistent winner overall, and they need somebody in a John Harbaugh who has been a consistent winner and knows how to build a winner too.
Right. The other thing, I mean, and the thing that I don't think John gets enough credit for is that he and Eric DaCosta has kept that team as a competitor for 17 of the 18 years he's been there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you wonder, you say to yourself, well, what happens if they make that kick and they're in the playoffs? Does he still get fired, or is that Tomlin that's on the block?
Yeah, I was going to say there was a funny graphic that somebody had put out, and it was a picture of the uprights, and on either side of the uprights it said "Fire Harbaugh," and in the middle it said "Fire Tomlin." It feels like as accurate a representation of what that kick really was.
Yeah. The Ravens have asked to speak to Clint Kubiak as a potential replacement, and which doesn't surprise me. I mean, he's a fine. He's who I'd go after if I were looking for a coach. John, of course, has been the front page of the both New York Post and New York Daily News had him as here's Johnny coming in. I made a prediction to some friends on Baltimore yesterday on radio that I believe that Harbaugh will win a Super Bowl before the Ravens will.
It- It's definitely possible, and it depends on which situation he lands in. Um,
He's not going to take
Miami.
a rebuild.
No, I think the Miami one's interesting because I don't like
Mhm.
where Miami's at in terms of their quarterback. And the same goes for Atlanta. Both of those places that
Mhm.
feel like they are quarterback needy in terms of their situations. Like Miami's is, I guess, little bit less up in the air. Like
Mhm.
they still have Tua Tagovailoa under contract. If John Harbaugh were to think that he is the long term option, I would say Atlanta's a little bit muddier, depending on the health of Michael Penix, and you also still have that big contract and Kirk Cousins sitting behind him.
Mhm.
But it is also interesting outside of the John Harbaugh domino that has to fall now is these teams that are looking to hire these top end guys like the Raiders and the Giants. The Jets
Mhm.
aren't out there yet, but these teams that are looking to hire somebody is now like a Clint Kubiak seemed to be the hottest name on the market. The top name on the market isn't going to be going to the Raiders or the Giants or the Browns anymore. Like they're not going to be at the top of the list. That Baltimore job is the best job open now in terms of what you
Mhm.
have on your roster.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing and there has not been a true confirmation. There's been smoke. There hasn't been true confirmation. Now, you'd mentioned that Ian Rappaport had written that John lost the locker room. Maybe so. Something Mike Preston had written in the Baltimore Sun a couple weeks ago. Um, when the after the post game, and a lot of people put a lot of stuff into the post game. What happens the moments after guys play. Honestly, that's the worst time to interview someone because you have no idea you can't process. You just lost a game that, frankly, you thought you won within seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they read into it. Well, Lamar didn't say anything about, Harbaugh. We wouldn't ask anything about Harbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
They just basically said, what's going on. Jameson, I forget Jameson's last name. He writes for the Baltimore Sun, good writer. Um, asked him about next season, and Lamar looked at him and said, Jameson, he says, the season ended 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I don't even know how to process what just happened, let alone next season.
Yeah.
But I do have a theory on this. Not a theory, it's a long-standing deal, and that is, don't ever let a player tell you to fire a coach.
No.
I mean, that never works. There's a famous Barry Corbin wrote a great article in the Miami Herald years ago when um, when LeBron got there and he wasn't pleased with how things were going, and he walks into Pat Riley's office and says to Pat, "You got to fire Eric Spoelstra and come back and coach."
Mm-hmm.
And Pat turned to him and said, "I'm the general manager and president of this club. Eric Spoelstra is the coach of the club. You play basketball in this club. You have a choice. You need to play basketball in this club, or you can't. It's up to you. But I'm not firing a coach because you don't like him."
Mm-hmm.
And LeBron's got some coaches fired, and it hasn't worked out well necessarily for those franchises that he's gotten coaches fired from. He hasn't won championships for that situation. So,
Mm-hmm.
my point being is, and look, I have no reason to believe Lamar Jackson has anything in the way of malice toward John Harbaugh. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing I've seen, read, or in any way, shape, or form that just doesn't. That's not how he plays. He's not how he works. He's a straight up kid. Nothing, no shade on him.
Mm-hmm.
But to paint it that you lose the locker room, okay, maybe it's right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you and I talked about this last week. If you want to move on, that's fine. if you're tired, if you think that for 18 years this experiment has worked fine but not enough, and this is a situation where the Glazers had when Tony Dungy was fired. Tony had a 9-7 season and was fired. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't think he had the capacity to hire an offensive coordinator that he would be, that he would be willing to let run the show. They got rid of him. We talked about the fact that John Gruden was brought over in what in essence was a trade,
Mm-hmm.
and Gruden got them a Super Bowl. After that Super Bowl, we all know that it took them decades to get back into competition, and it wasn't until Jason Light became the general manager that they even came close to making the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So, be careful what you wish for. You want to get rid of Tony Dungy? Okay, cool. The Glazers got rid of him. They got their hot guy. They got the hot guy they wanted. He got them to a Super Bowl, and then boom, everything went back to what it was before Tony Dungy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's like any relationship. Like I mean this is human nature sometimes. Like sometimes you hear people, you can hear people talk about them. Why'd you break up with so and so?
Sure, of course.
It seemed so good. Yeah, it was good, but it just wasn't right.
Right.
Like sometimes there's just no like concrete definite answer other than it just doesn't feel right. Like you've gone through the process and it's been good, but it just hasn't been good enough. Um, and that's kind of where people got in Baltimore, and that's fans, that's ownership, apparently that's players as well, based on the reporting.
Maybe, yeah,
Is
and
where
maybe John.
yeah, is where they just got to a point to where good wasn't good enough in their relationship, and there's no sometimes there's just no explanation. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. You can be really good together, but it's just not perfect. And sometimes you're looking for perfect, and sometimes in the pursuit of perfection, you can get yourself hurt on the way to it. And that may be what Baltimore's in for if they don't get this next hire right. In fact, I can tell you if they don't get this next hire right, that is what they're in for, because
Right.
sometimes they won in spite of some large deficiencies on that football team, specifically the wide receiver room that held them back for a while with Lamar
Right.
Jackson. And
You
so
know, go ahead.
I was just going to say they have to go and nail this hire because they are still in a competitive window. And it wasn't the right fit for that locker room and for that team. But that competitive window is still open. And so you have to capitalize on this competitive window while you still have it. Because I can tell you this thing, Lamar Jackson's not walking out of that draft every year.
Right.
And you're also maybe not always going to be in position to draft him, even if he is.
They also only have one more year on Derrick Henry's deal.
Mm-hmm. And again, as much as the draft and having these guys is important, they're aging too. Like these guys age. Lamar Jackson is a very good quarterback, and he has progressed a ton as a passer throughout his career.
Yep.
His game is still very dependent on his athleticism as well, and he's not getting younger by the year. So they have to get the right head coach in there, and quite frankly, the general manager has to move some chess pieces around because what the product was this year was not good enough.
No, the other thing is that Derek DeCosta, now that Harbaugh's gone, and a new coach, they don't know who the new coach is yet.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the midst of renegotiating, Lamar's contract.
Mm-hmm.
To a great degree, how you can improve the ball club is going to be literally on Lamar Jackson's ability to renegotiate a contract so that the cap isn't so onerous that you just can't sign guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be an issue. And again, I agree with you 100% with regard to John. And let's, I'll take you back. What I was going to do is talk about 2 years in a row. You may remember, way back, probably when you were a child, that the Cleveland Browns were in the AFC Championship game twice against John Elway and the Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
They had the famous fumble, Ernest Biner's famous fumble, which cost them a touchdown toward the end of the game, and then the drive. Both times they lost. The following year, Marty Schottenheimer said he was fired. Art Modell said he wasn't, said he quit. And honestly, what it was, management asked him to fire the defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And Marty said no.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Marty, this is not us asking you. This is us telling you we are going to fire the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And Marty said, fine, you fire him, you fire me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They fired him.
Yeah.
So a year later passes. Happened to see Marty. I said, Marty, just out of curiosity, what the hell happened? Because Art said he didn't fire you, and you said he fired you.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, frankly, I was upset. I had done everything I thought I could do. I didn't want to be there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I figured, all right, if I push this, let's see how far it goes. And he basically pushed it to the point where he got fired.
Mm-hmm.
Or he didn't, depending upon, again, the late Art Modell, so we won't have a chance to ask him.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the point being that maybe John, in that meeting the other day with Eric, knew that Eric wanted him to get rid of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was Todd Monken, maybe it was the defensive coordinator, maybe it was the special teams coach. I don't know.
Maybe it was all of them.
Could have been all of them, right? So let's get rid of them all and start again. And John said no. And maybe John knew that, okay, I'm going to push it, and see what it gets me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think I agree with you. They got to nail it. They got to nail it down right. And Eric's a good guy, smart guy. But I don't think they had a plan when they fired him. Because it doesn't seem that DaCosta, who was surprised by the firing, and Harbaugh, who was surprised by the firing, seemingly the only person not surprised by the firing was Steve Bisciotti. In fairness to Bisciotti, he's not a Jerry Jones kind of guy. I mean, he's a very mellow, easygoing, type of guy. So, again, when he fired Brian Billick to get John Harbaugh, Brian had just come off of a winning season.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he lost. And by the way, last year, Bisciotti signed a 3-year deal with John, an extension.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing he did with Brian Billick. He signed an extension to Billick's contract. Now, again, that was an Art Modell hire. It wasn't his. But he signed him to a 3-year deal. So he's basically, after he signed the 3-year extension to Billick, and then the same thing to John, fired the coach. We'll see. Again, was it a reaction? Was it any? It doesn't matter really. At the end of the day, it matters what happens next for both those guys. What happens for John and what happens to the Ravens organization.
Yeah, what I will say is I'm more okay with it, the fact that it came yesterday instead of like if it came on Monday. If it came on Monday, it would have felt very reactionary. You can still make the argument that it is reactionary right now. It's something I talked about with Penn State and James Franklin a lot. Is I don't like emotion making decisions like this because it's very possible, especially if you listen to a fan base in particular, because a fan base is just it's just emotion embodied by a larger group. And so it could have purely been emotion if they fired him on Monday, and that would have been fine. It still could be emotion when they fire him on Tuesday, but they allowed for more time, and it seems like they allowed for a little bit more thought process and conversation before they realized that they just had a fundamental disagreement on the way the coaching staff was going to work going forward.
Right. The other thing that I think that needs to be done, and whether it's DaCosta or whether it's the owner, Bisciotti, somebody's going to have to sit down and hold a press conference and answer some questions.
Yeah.
Again, John's going to be paid. He'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens will sell out the stadium. The fans will come. They will be fine. Lamar Jackson will get his money. He will be fine. But the next hire is the single most important hire is Steve Bisciotti's ownership career and Eric DeCosta's career as a general manager of the
Mhm.
Baltimore Ravens. Because as you
Yeah.
said, as we started this, and we should flag this as a clip, as you said at the beginning, and we talked about it, and we agreed, you can't screw this one up.
No, no. If you screw this up, you're setting. I wouldn't say you're setting your franchise back, but it's just such a missed opportunity in terms of who you have at quarterback and the really the overall talent on your team. Like their defense has been really good. I know it wasn't great to start the year; it got better throughout the year because they got a little bit healthier and guys kind of started to mesh together. Like they got better as a team throughout the year as they continue to get healthy and this is still one of the better talent rosters in the NFL in terms of the guys that you have on both sides of the football. I've talked about their wide receiver room and I've criticized it. It's not they have a top end guy. Zay Flowers is a top end guy. Their tight end room is fantastic. Their offensive line could probably use a little bit of work. But again, at
They could use a
quarterback,
tackle or two. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, at quarterback and running back rooms though, you've got really good top end starter and in the running back room, you got good depth. You got good depth at the quarterback position too, with Snoop Huntley sitting behind him.
Right.
The offense is good. The defense has been solid. They probably could use a little help. Marlon Humphrey was a big problem for them this year defensively. I think barbecue chicken is probably what he was just about every Sunday.
Right.
Well, been out there with tailgaters. So they've got really good pieces and a really good overall roster, but now they have to find somebody that's able to put it all together because John Harbaugh wasn't. And it wasn't that they didn't get close. Like they've gotten really close. They were the 1 seed a couple years ago. That didn't work out for them.
They held it a year. Was it a year? 2 years?
It was 2023. They were the number one overall seed.
Right. They held. They were the Chiefs came to town. Taylor Swift came to town
Mm-hmm.
and walked away. That was the famous dropped pass from, you know,
It was when Zay
Andrews,
Flowers.
Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews was last year. That was in
Was that
Buffalo.
last year?
Zay Flowers had it punched out at the goal line
Oh
against
yeah.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
That's what it was against Kansas City.
Yeah.
So I've said they've been close, and some of it's just been bad luck overall. Like Zay Flowers getting the ball punched out, that is a fantastic play, and
By a
I don't really
defensive
think
guy.
yeah, I don't really think there's anything that Zay Flowers does differently there. You've got an All Pro tight end in Mark Andrews last year who has the 2-point conversion to tie the football game in his hands, and he drops it. Like it's just stuff that you can't count on, you can't quantify, and overall, it's just bad luck. And really, when you look at it, the way that Tyler Loop had been kicking, John Harbaugh got fired because there was bad luck. Like if they make that kick, he's probably not. He's probably still the sitting head coach in Baltimore today. In fact, I can guarantee you he is because they'd be prepping for a playoff game.
They'd have to.
Even if they lost that wild card game, he'd still be the head coach in Baltimore.
Which leads me to think that this was more reactionary on the owner than it was anything else. But again, I don't fire coaches. It's up to the owners and the general managers to do that. I respect the owner. He puts the money into the team. It's his team. He can do what he wants to with it. I think that this, in the end, it will probably be better for both sides that John moves on. And they have to, there's been a lot of talk about Kevin Stefanski. I just don't know how Kevin Stefanski would fit in that, in the position of the Ravens.
Yeah, because you need a guy that is going to be able to, if the reporting is true, you have to have a guy that's going to be really good with his player relationships. And I think that's really one of the things that Kevin Stefanski was criticized for during his time in Cleveland. I don't think he had fantastic relationships with all the players. That quarterback room was hotly debated during his time there as well. So it's interesting because Stefanski is a guy who's gonna be hands-on with the quarterbacks. Like that's kind of his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so whoever you're bringing in, if he is a guy like that, regardless of whether or not he is a quarterback first guy, they are going to have a good relationship with Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's going to be necessarily difficult to do, but there's a difference between getting along and being on the same page. Like you
Mhm.
can get along with somebody, and it looks a heck of a lot different when you're on the same page, thinking the same way with somebody.
Well, I tend to like um, how the young coordinators have come out and done so well, which is why I think Clint Kubiak, if they were to be able to get him there, would probably be a good hire.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Kubiak reminds me a great deal of Liam Cohen, who's at Jacksonville. He's young, he's energetic. The players love him because he is close and relates to them. I think the problem, perhaps in John's case, John's 62 years old. He doesn't relate as well to the modern day player.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a staff that was an elder, a little older than the normal staff as well. So I think from that standpoint, that uh, a guy like Clint Kubiak is really someone who could energize the locker room because he's that kind of guy. Raheem Morris is a soft-spoken guy, but he's a results-driven guy, which is why I think defensively he wouldn't be uh, a bad hire,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because you need somebody who can stabilize things.
Yeah.
There has been some talk, and I wouldn't rule it out. I would strongly consider talking to Ed Reed, who was coaching in some college stuff. Um, I would bring Ed back. Give him a defensive backs role. You know, um, get some more juice in there. Get some more excitement in there. And they've got the time, they got the money, they can make it work. The question is who's the fit, and we don't know that yet.
Yeah, I think in terms of your Ed Reed idea,
Mm-hmm.
I I don't think it's a bad idea in theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think when you're dealing with something as volatile as their current championship window, that
Mm-hmm.
feels like more of you're taking a risk or you're taking a chance there on a situation that you're not really in a position to be able to take a risk or a chance. Like you need something that you know or you at least feel like you know is going to work like immediately. That one feels a little bit more like kind of a spin of the roulette wheel.
Well, I'm just saying on Reed's behalf. I mean, he's the cornerback coach. I don't think that. I mean, that defensive back coach. I don't think there's anything that Ed Reed's going to do is going to hurt that ability to do it. Um, he may not be the guy. I'm just throwing his name out there just because if you want to try to create culture, Ed Reed was always a culture guy in the locker room when he played, and maybe that would be something for them to consider. But we will find that out as time goes by in that regard. Uh, let's go back to the Falcons for a minute. They don't have a general manager.
Mm.
Would and they moved Rich McKay directly now to strictly running the stadium.
Hmm.
That's his job. Do you think Arthur Blank? I don't know. I don't know Arthur's. I know early Arthur, not now Arthur. Do you think Arthur would consider bringing John in and saying that we will give you X amount of money and you can help us pick the general manager?
It's definitely possible. If you really think that he is the guy that's going to get the job done, then why not give him full autonomy of the
Mm-hmm.
of the process? Make
Because he
sure it's
doesn't want to be the general manager. I mean,
no,
that's the,
no. Yeah, this isn't.
it's not
I
for
don't
Bill
think this would be.
Parcells. No, it's not Bill
Yeah,
Parcells.
this isn't Bill Belichick. Like
No.
again, we talked about it yesterday. I
Mm-hmm.
think talking about how a sticking point in Bill Belichick not ending up in Atlanta last
Mm-hmm.
year was because Bill wanted to hire his own general manager, and Arthur Blank
Right.
did not want him to. Now, this is pure assumption, but given his role at North Carolina, you would assume that would have been Michael Lombardi, the I guess questionable figure that now resides over UNC football.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so I don't think John's a guy that's going to have the same narrative or the same thought process around a general manager hire that Bill Belichick did. Like, there's not one guy that I don't think John's just like banked on his entire career that he's
Mhm.
going to be steadfast in hiring. It feels like something that you're probably going to get an ally and somebody that's looking for the best person to do the job, not just finding their best friend
Mhm.
to plug into that position. And it again, he's been a really good head coach for a really long time. He's a really smart football mind,
Mhm.
and I would trust him to help in my hiring process of a general manager.
One other thing before we move away from the Atlanta situation, and I didn't know this until yesterday. They have two different firms looking for coaches and general managers. I've never heard that one before.
That's odd. Um, I I guess you could justify that as each having their own individual focus.
I guess
Um,
come
that's
back and come with a consensus. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. That is strange because I mean generally you just have
Right,
um, one
and,
firm making
and
making
sometimes one can be too much.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes one can have too many cooks in the kitchen, but
Right.
that's interesting. That's odd.
Mhm.
You would assume that if they went the John Harbaugh route, then maybe you get a little bit more continuity in terms of that hiring process overall.
Okay, let's go back and talk about the two Florida teams that were potentially interested in John,
Hmm.
Miami and Tampa. Um, there's two things. There's things on both sides, the Buck side and the Dolphin side, that would trouble me a bit. The ownership of the Dolphins, um, Stephen Ross. Stephen been has been willing to throw money, but has not been willing to put it in the right place.
Hmm.
And so his coaching hires have never really panned out because he has the general manager and the coach have never been necessarily on the same page.
Hmm.
And so that concerns me if I'm a coach going in there. You can argue the talent they have on that roster is pretty good too. But you also could argue that they're in a division where the Patriots are getting better. The Bills aren't going to go away for a while. And they don't really have a number one quarterback at this point in time.
Hmm.
Then you go to the other side of the state. We'll come back and regroup it in just a second. I'm just framing it up for you here as we flag this comment, boys and girls. I'm just framing up the fact that, all right, we talk about Steve Ross and his dysfunctional situation in Miami. The Glaciers are laser sharp, and Jason Light is good at putting together rosters, but they're on the tail end of Baker Mayfield's contract. They're going to have to make a decision that will decide: do we bring somebody in? Do we make a trade? Do we try to find somebody in the draft? Do we extend Baker? What do we do? There's a number of players who got beat up and got hurt. It's a division where we know that certainly the Saints, the Falcons, Carolina, and the Bucks are all pretty much, um, you can throw a blanket over the four of them. It's gonna be an interesting situation. So I don't know. I mean, if either of those teams or both of those teams decide let's go all in on John, they can write the check for him.
Hmm.
Um, but what does it work out? Does either of those opportunities do you think would be something that John would be even interested in?
I, I find I will say on the Dolphins side of things, they did finally fire their general manager. He'd been in
Took a while,
power,
but yeah.
yeah, he'd been in power since 2000. That was Chris Greer. So that probably will help in terms of the overall situation of the Dolphins.
Mhm.
And this is something that I will say should not factor into a coach's thinking. If it does factor into a coach's thinking, I don't think they're made out to be a head coach. But sitting here in this chair at home, having no coaching experience at all, I can look at it objectively and say the easier division's Tampa. Like no
Mhm.
doubt about it. When you look at it going forward into the future, the easier division is the NFC South.
Mhm.
You don't have the Bills or the Patriots, and I don't think the Bills window is closing anytime soon, even
Yeah.
though maybe they haven't reached the same peaks these last couple of years.
Mhm.
Um, and I think what you got going on in New England is probably just getting going. So in terms of that, that's definitely the better option. But both of these rosters have a lot of holes and a lot of problems when it comes
Mhm.
to some positions aging, really kind of an overall lack. I think Tampa Bay probably has some more young talent than
Mhm.
Miami does, but both rosters are kind of devoid of that younger talent.
Mhm.
Um, that you really are dependent on in the NFL. Like you have to have some really good young guys that are on those rookie deals that help you fill out and build out your team. The same way you also have to have a quarterback who's not on a mega contract either.
Mhm.
Miami does have a quarterback on a mega contract, but it feels like they would be willing to offload that contract to another team if they were willing to take it on. I would say they would probably have to eat some money in that if I was guessing. And then Baker Mayfield's kind of a guy where he's done a really good job, but you're going to be looking towards the future potentially here in a couple of years, and that future very likely may not be Baker Mayfield.
Right. And I think that I think you're right about the situation. The the stability with Jason Light in Tampa Bay, um, and the proven ability of the Glazers to sign checks that are big checks to do whatever it takes to get what they want. I think John. I think John would probably feel more comfortable on that side, and it also, and this is probably, it sounds in some regards a bit hokey, but there is no fan base in Miami.
No.
It doesn't exist.
Mm.
There seems to be too much going on in Miami that people don't find their way to the stadium. And for those of you who've never been, the stadium, frankly, isn't in Miami. It's almost in Broward County. They literally had to create a name, Miami Lakes, and incorporate it because it was so close to the damn border of Broward County and Duval County. I'm sorry, Dade County. That that they had to create a situation there. There is a fan base with the Buccaneers. Uh, I don't think that the Buccaneers is a better job at the moment than the Atlanta job because I think the Atlanta probably has core talent wise more core talent than the Bucks do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that that Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Miami, the Giants, those would be if those four were open, probably be four things that John's going to be interested in. I know you'd mentioned it earlier about Oakland, right? Or not? I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, Vegas. I don't think John wants to be in the same division with his brother.
Yeah, that's fair and that's understandable. I don't think it takes away from what there is opportunity wise in Vegas. I
No,
still
there's a guy, there's a roster there, and you could make that roster pretty good pretty fast. But that's a
Mhm.
hell of a division too.
It is, and but again, like I said, if you bring a coach in for an interview, and one of his determining factors is like, well, this division's better than the other. I'm not sure they're made out to be a head coach, anyways.
It's there's one of the funny things. I think what all I'm saying about John is I'm not saying that's his modus operandi. I'm saying that if I'm a John Harbaugh, I don't want to go rebuild somebody's team.
No.
I walked off of a team that was a potential Super Bowl. Everybody at the beginning of the season thought this team could make it to the Super Bowl. They didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play. I want a team that I can plug and play. Maybe okay. Maybe next year I don't get to the playoffs, or maybe I can push them into the playoffs, but I can't get beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 or 3 years down the road, I want to be a heavy competitor,
Yeah.
and I think that could very well be a situation where we see what's going on. Now, I'm going to throw something out here, a bit of a curveball, and it's just one of those wacky. You know how sometimes you get up in the morning and you think, this would be an interesting situation. What if because he's had some health issues, but they're longtime friends. What if Andy Reid picks up the phone and says, John, I've decided I'm going to retire. Would you be interested in coaching the Kansas City Chiefs? I think that would be a tough thing for John to say no to.
I don't think it's.
Not that it's going to happen. I'm just saying it would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it. I I wouldn't have any problem saying no to it if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest. Because again, you're talking about now you've got a fan base whose expectations are you better win the
Ridiculous.
Super Bowl. Yeah, yeah, their expectations are that of Alabama after Nick Saban retired,
Right.
that kind of thing. When you add that to a quarterback who takes up a lump sum of your salary cap every year,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Travis Kelce's not going anywhere. Overall, you have a pretty aging roster. Most of
Right.
your young defensive superstars have gone out the door, and you've just kind of workshopped that wide receiver room over the last couple of years.
Right.
Also, just a complete absence of a run game this year.
Yeah.
Like there's problems there that I'm not sure you're one off season away from fixing in Kansas
Right.
City.
True. Absolutely true. All right, let's see. We're going to get into our 5-minute mark here because Joe's going to come up. Joe Wiz come up at the top of the hour. Let's see. Anything you want to bring up from that we haven't talked about?
I will say back to the actually completely shift course. College basketball is
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in a really good spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of Auburn fans that are upset based off videos or screenshots that they've pulled from last night, which
Mm-hmm.
quite frankly, I've seen a ton of them. The only one that I've actually gotten a clear look on that isn't just the blurriest picture possible. It appears that that the ball is still in the shooter's hand when the shot is taken. So there's that. So it doesn't necessarily. I think it still highlights that recruiting or not recruiting, officiating in college sports is not going well right now, like at all whatsoever. But again, it's still really ugly when you have people throwing things at referees as they walk off the court.
Well, that's not a good idea in any sport. I
No.
mean, you can have you have baseball umpires. You can have people who are officiating. The ones who really get the most heat are the ones who officiate soccer, in Europe and in South America. Those guys take their lives in their hands literally whenever they head out. But no, look, they're going to make mistakes. Deal with it. Auburn, that whole Auburn thing is to me like, if that's taken a while ago, get over it, go play, win games, shut up, and you won't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And it goes back to the, the kid, he made an amazing shot. It was right at the buzzer. But again, through your play, through the first, because I think there was like 0.7 left on the clock.
Sure.
So through 59 minutes and 59 and 3/3 and 3/10 seconds,
right.
you have not done what is necessary to win that basketball game. You are down by 2 points. You did not do what was necessary to win that basketball game. And so by that, you've now put this result up to that last shot, up to that decision that is really honestly split second for those referees and officials. If you play better through the first 59 minutes, 59 seconds and 3/10 of a second,
right,
then guess what? You don't have to worry about it. But that's never going to be good enough. There's always somebody to blame for fan bases when they lose.
Sure.
And, for as long as sports goes on, that will happen. But to be throwing stuff at the referees as they walk off the floor, it's
or players for that matter.
Yeah, it's bad. It's wrong. And Auburn kind of prides themselves on being a nice Christian university, and it's not a great look overall.
No, not a very Christian thing to do. All right, boys and girls. Tomorrow, bring your pads and pencils because Matthew and I are going to go through the gauntlet that is the college football playoffs, and we'll have some fun because there's some really good football tomorrow and Friday, and of course we get to the playoffs on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So
Hmm.
plenty to talk about starting tomorrow. Maybe John Harbaugh's not going to have a job by that time, so don't worry about that. As you say, I think he is the domino unless you realize you're not going to get him, then you go and try to pick up somebody like, maybe you go and get Stefanski, and maybe Oakland goes and gets Stefanski. Maybe that's where he goes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it may be like kind of a dual thing because now that Baltimore job may be the domino that needs to fall as well. Like both of
true.
them have to
Yeah,
fall before the entire coaching
right.
search.
Which one? And Kubiak's not going to be able to. If Kubiak is the guy,
Hmm.
um, they're going to have to wait till Seattle gets out of the playoffs, and that could be a long time.
Yeah, it absolutely could. Number one overall seed in the NFC.
Yep. And they earned it at the tail end of the season,
Hmm.
which is probably one of the reasons why Kubiak is a hot commodity.
Absolutely.
Hang on, we got dude quit time.
Not really sure what
Not
that's.
quite sure what that means, but we'll try our best not to do that. We'll try our best not to tie. Didn't know we were doing that. Okay. All right, brothers and sisters, thanks for coming by this afternoon. For Matthew, I'm Jim, and we will be back tomorrow, same time around 3 o'clock. And bring your questions, and we'll try to answer them for you. Till then, take care.